Zombies, huh? Had a feeling you'd show up. God, it's you. Look, don't sneak up on me.
The 7th console generation was the first time in my life that I held off on getting any of the new boxes on day one. While the Xbox 360 had looked pretty neat, I didn't see enough games available that interested me when November 2005 rolled around. Everything I wanted to play that holiday season was either on the original Xbox or PC. I was basically set. Then 2006 rolled around, and Microsoft started to go truly hard with new releases. The first game that solidified that I needed an Xbox 360 was Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter. The one that truly made me fall in love with the console was Dead Rising. A game unlike anything that I had ever played before, save for comparisons to Resident Evil and possibly even Rockstar's State of Emergency, Dead Rising felt like it had come from the future with its large environments, open-ended structure, and ability to let players take practically everything in the environment and use it as a weapon. Smashing zombies with a jug of orange juice, or riding a skateboard through a crowd of hundreds was a joy I never knew I needed until this game came out. It's pretty easy to tell that I was a big fan of Dead Rising. One of my best friends and I would get together on the weekends and play the game for hours on end. The ability to carry over your stats to new runs, and even experience different endings based on your actions, gave Dead Rising a level of replayability that was unparalleled at the time. It also didn't hurt that you could dress up the main character, Frank West, in all manner of goofy outfits, and possibly perform the greatest combat move in any video game ever, the disembowel. So why am I bringing all of this up? Well, Capcom is about ready to release a deluxe remaster for Dead Rising that overhauls the visuals and sands away some of the rougher edges with regards to gameplay. After 18 years, Capcom is ready to give Dead Rising another shot, and while I'm happy we could be seeing more installments in the future, this remaster got me thinking, does Dead Rising truly need a remaster? For anyone assumes that I'm trying to make a clickbait type video, let me quell your anger up front. I'm not opposed to Dead Rising receiving some tweaks. I would always urge someone to play the original, and that is thankfully 100% possible, as Dead Rising is available on PC, PS4, and Xbox One. It may have started as an Xbox 360 title, and even gotten awkward ports to Wii and iOS, but the OG iteration is still readily available on digital storefronts and as a physical copy. With this video, I wanted to break down different aspects of Dead Rising that I feel are important, and how they could potentially be changed or altered with a remaster. A lot of times with older games, no matter how highly I or anyone else may regard them, they just haven't aged as well as you'd like. Is that the case with Dead Rising? Why don't we go category by category and see what Capcom could potentially spruce up for this return trip to Willamette Parkview Mall. And no, Dead Rising 4 doesn't count.
I've covered wars, you know.
This is possibly the most subjective element of Dead Rising, but I feel that its plotline is perfectly fine in the original game. There isn't really much that a remaster could expand upon or change, which doesn't even seem to be the case with Deluxe Remaster. In all of the promotional material Capcom has shown thus far, the remaster could practically be a one-to-one remake with very little change in terms of narrative or characters. The biggest point of contention here comes from the change of Frank West's voice actor. Much like with Dead Rising 4, Capcom has not opted to bring TJ Rotolo back to voice the iconic photojournalist. We can only speculate on the answer, but Rotolo himself has stated that he wasn't asked to return. Capcom has a history of going with non-union actors for its games, and that could be one of the reasons for the change. Weirdly, no one else in the game seems to be affected, though we haven't seen every single psychopath or survivor yet. I'll talk more about this in the audio-visual category. If there is to be any change with the story, the only thing I'd like to see is better connections to Dead Rising 2. Nothing in this game or sequel contradict each other, but it would be cool to get a reference or nod to Chuck Green in Fortune City that isn't solely a DLC costume. For the most part, the gameplay aspect of the original Dead Rising has remained incredibly solid. Its various sequels built upon different elements from the original and either expanded them or refined them, but the core of what Dead Rising was is still immensely playable in 2024. Having just beaten the game for possibly the 12th time since I first played it, my only complaints are the same stuff I complained about even back in 2006. The one change we know is coming is that survivor AI is getting tweaked. I doubt the survivors will be completely unstoppable or perfect, but the AI for them in the original is often frustrating as hell. Despite having saved everyone before, my latest playthrough saw a bunch of survivors getting devoured almost instantly because someone got stuck on a bench or simply refused to walk despite Frank yelling "over here." As for guns, I've kind of warmed up to not being able to move and shoot. It was annoying back in the day, but on a mouse and keyboard, your accuracy is so ludicrously high that being able to move would destroy the balance. Guns are way more powerful than I remember, and since I was able to hit headshots more consistently, it trivialized most of the boss encounters. Well, that and I had unlocked the Mega Buster, so everyone just went down in a couple of shots. Excuse this footage for just dominating all of the boss fights. That said, the guns really are ridiculously powerful in Dead Rising, so I kinda understand why Capcom limited player movement with them, other than the company was trying to emulate Resident Evil 4 without really thinking. We do know that Deluxe Remaster will allow players to move and shoot at the same time, so I would hope that Capcom tones down the damage output of guns to ensure a smooth challenge. I do remember the boss fights from back in the day, and most of them could be annoying as hell. It sucks getting juggled with shots because you simply could not aim fast enough to hit anyone before they shot you. I also have no beef with weapons breaking or Frank having a limited inventory. All of that is part and parcel to what Dead Rising is. Same goes with the time limit. The game is about surviving a zombie apocalypse with the supplies you gather in a mall and being on the clock. If you remove those elements or tone them down, Dead Rising would become easier and more monotonous. I suppose different difficulty modes could be added, but that's what I would want over a blanket decision to let Frank store weapons, stack inventory items, or have unlimited time to do every mission. Any of the other improvements or additions that Dead Rising 2 or 3 made to the series should be left out. My biggest gripe with most remakes is that they try to homogenize a franchise into being the same thing for every installment, and it robs each entry of having its own identity. We already know Capcom is not bringing combo weapons or vehicles to Deluxe Remaster, and I don't see anything about weapon lockers, etc., so in this regard, the remaster seems very faithful, which is good. I'm giving the save system of Dead Rising its own category because it was one of the more contentious elements of the original game back in 2006. While autosaving was still not standard in gaming back then, it had become enough of a norm that Dead Rising excluding it felt truly bizarre. It also seriously clashed with the design of the game, which put an emphasis on having players race around the mall and make deadlines for missions with little room to detour. Failing to make a deadline or even dying while trying to get there meant restarting the entire game if you hadn't saved recently. Maybe that was intended to pay homage to the original Resident Evil games, but those titles were also not 8 to 10 hours long for a single playthrough. We know right off the bat that Deluxe Remaster will be adding an autosave option, and I think that is wonderful. With that said, I don't think requiring players to go to a physical spot to make a save is a bad decision. The true pain of the original Dead Rising save system was that it didn't take mission completion or survivor escorts into account. When making significant progress, it would make sense for the game to perform an autosave. When you're just goofing around killing zombies, there isn't much reason to back that up. I'm not sure exactly how saving will operate in Deluxe Remaster, but my impression is that traveling between different areas of the mall will trigger an autosave, while players will need to visit the restroom or a safe area to make a proper save. One of the best additions that 8th generation consoles made to the gaming experience was to have a suspend state for the hardware, so some of the biggest inconveniences of Dead Rising have already been eliminated. You won't need to shut off the game at a moment's notice anymore without saving, since you can just suspend your console. Even so, I don't think the original game is unplayable with its save system. It certainly can be inconvenient, but once you work around its peculiarities, Dead Rising is mostly fine. Every time you return to the beginning, you'll have a more powerful Frank, and it will make surviving against the zombie horde and psychopaths easier. The finale and overtime mode also gives you a save before the final boss, which is very nice since he's an asshole. That aspect could do with a touch-up, though. We've come to the category that is going to be the most divisive among fans, and with good reason. TJ Rotolo is not returning as Frank, and that sucks. For a remaster that is otherwise faithful to a fault, not bringing back an iconic actor seems like a scummy move by Capcom. It makes you wonder if any other audio elements are getting changed, though we do have confirmation that all of the original licensed music has remained intact. Capcom has also confirmed that it will be adding new dialogue for survivors to better immerse the player. Otis will also finally get a voice, and his aggravating transceiver calls can no longer be interrupted. I have no real opinion on this, however, as I read much faster than dialogue can be spoken. I tend to like when games let me read and skip text as it can increase the pace. That said, I'm not quite sure what would even need to be changed from an audio standpoint. The generic mall music has become ingrained in my memory, and all of the weapon sound effects are still very high quality. Dead Rising was designed specifically as one of Capcom's first true high-definition games, so nothing sounds or looks all that bad. Even the sometimes hokey voice acting isn't as egregiously awful as in the original Resident Evil, for instance. It feels purposely cheesy instead of being a result of a low budget. I suppose some of the visuals could be given a higher resolution, but Deluxe Remaster is definitely going in a different direction. To me, the visual changes in Deluxe Remaster sort of change the mood and ambiance of Dead Rising. I've noted on Twitter that I think Frank's new character model looks a bit too ugly, but generally speaking, I'm not a fan of most of the new character models. The original game wasn't going for hyper-realism, and while some of the models could look like PS2 era stuff, nothing felt as if it didn't belong. In Deluxe Remaster, what we've seen makes me believe Capcom is trying to combine the hyper-realism of its recent Resident Evil remakes with overly caricatured designs. At least when it comes to the mall, that seems to fare better. It's hard to really mess up stone, paint, and tile, but Deluxe Remaster looks more or less similar enough to the original. I do think the addition of real-time lighting is a good change, as it will make the day-night cycle feel more dynamic. The weapons look nice, and I'm certainly a big fan of the zombie gore getting revamped. I can also get behind a higher zombie count, even if the original's 800 zombies were often overwhelming. The thing is, I just don't see anything that makes me think this is definitively better. This mostly looks different from the original. Capcom's artists have done a great job making the game look modern, but it also doesn't completely look like Dead Rising anymore. Thankfully, Capcom is not redoing most of the animations, and all of the goofier elements are still here. I can't wait to see a weirdly hyper-realistic Surfbot helmet, but I don't know how I feel overall. To me, this is one of those instances where a person who hates older games would suddenly love Dead Rising just because its graphics are new, despite nothing else having been tweaked. For my final category, I wanted to bring up the level design of Dead Rising's mall, and talk about anything I think Deluxe Remaster could tweak here. The layout itself feels like an homage to the Mall of America, and while it certainly has more themed areas than any of my local malls, it's an excellent setting for a zombie video game. Wouldn't want Capcom to remove anything from the mall, but it might be cool to see some new stuff added. The movie theater, for instance, is pretty damn small for a mall movie theater. It feels more like one of those low-budget mom-and-pop theaters rather than a big Cineplex. The hardware store is similar in that its aisles are a bit too close together. Just beefing them out a little could make them feel more like open areas worth exploring, instead of aggravating stops where the camera gets stuck on edges. The only other change I think would be neat is a complete removal of loading screens. That would fundamentally change what Dead Rising is, and even necessitate more than this Deluxe Remaster is bringing, but it would be cool to see the Willamette Parkview Mall completely unobstructed by loading screens. That would also give this remaster more of a reason to exist, as it wouldn't be advertised as a complete replacement for the original, just a different take with more modern technology. Overall, I'm pretty sure you could have guessed from the start that I don't believe Dead Rising needs a remaster. I feel that games are products of their era that should be preserved with all of their warts and faults for new audiences to experience. One cannot learn how far gaming as a medium has come if they don't have to deal with any of the frustrations of the past. At the same time, most everything Capcom has said is being changed in Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster doesn't seem like a net negative. Art style and graphical tweaks will never be my bag, but I could deal with them if it means new audiences get to experience this unique zombie game. Dead Rising was a once great series that got lost in 2010's Capcom's desire to appeal to every possible audience at once. Returning to the original to see why fans became enamored in the first place is the right call. It could even result in a brand new installment after all this time. Bringing autosaves is a logical addition, and fixing things like Survivor AI is something fans had wanted since the original was released. Maybe the sequels tweaked and improved the deficiencies already, but minor updates to the original are exactly how remasters should be handled. Entire graphical overhauls, though, I can do without, but it is what it is. When Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster does release this September, I hope it brings an entire new swath of fans into the franchise and gets them to experience some great games they may have missed out on. Dead Rising may have gone downhill for its fourth installment, but the possibilities of its open-ended structure and everything as a weapon philosophy have never lost their luster even at the worst of times. If we can have that again, I'll be content with Deluxe Remaster.
Has since then died. Well, let me tell you, I am doing